Think about the last decision you made online. A purchase, a subscription, maybe just clicking Add to Cart on something that appeared in your feed. It felt like you, didn't it? Like your preference, your taste, your choice. But here's the question. What if that feeling of you-ness was itself the product being engineered? If your decision emerged from an environment designed to trigger that specific decision by exploiting your psychological vulnerabilities, and the engineering was so effective that it felt completely natural, can that decision be called yours? This isn't abstract philosophy. It's the documented business model of every major digital platform you use. Surveillance capitalism operates by collecting behavioral data, building psychographic profiles, and deploying targeted interventions designed to make certain choices feel like your authentic preferences. The infrastructure exists at scale. 38.7 billion tracking incidents documented in 2024 alone. Research shows these systems can predict your decisions with 70% accuracy, and critically, the most effective predictions are the ones that don't feel like predictions at all. The question isn't whether manipulation happens. The question is, why doesn't it feel like manipulation? This video examines 3 things. First, the mechanism. How surveillance capitalism engineers the feeling of authentic choice. Second, the evidence. What research actually shows about why effective influence doesn't feel like influence. Third, the philosophical question. What autonomy means when coercion feels like freedom. All sources cited in this video are listed with full details in the description. To understand why this matters, you need to see what this looks like in practice. Here's what surveillance capitalism looks like. Right now, as you browse this platform, between 40 and 160 tracking scripts are monitoring your behavior. According to NordVPN's 2024 analysis of the world's most popular websites, the average website contains 48 trackers. Social media platforms? 160 trackers on average. Every pause, every rewind, every moment you hover over content without clicking. This data flows to platform companies and data brokers, where it's processed into a psychographic profile. Not just what you do, but why you do it. Your personality traits, your emotional vulnerabilities, your persuasion susceptibility. According to Kaspersky's 2024 analysis of web tracking, over 38.7 billion tracking incidents were recorded between July 2023 and June 2024. That's more than 1 million tracking attempts daily. At least 70% of the world's online population is profiled. The data broker industry was valued at $257 billion in 2023 and is projected to reach $441 billion by 2032. This isn't niche surveillance affecting privacy-conscious users. This is ubiquitous infrastructure. Cambridge Analytica provides documented proof this works. Between 2014 and 2018, the firm harvested Facebook data from 87 million users without consent. They built psychological profiles using the OCEN personality model: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. They deployed micro-targeted political messages tailored to individual vulnerabilities during the 2016 Brexit referendum and US presidential election. After years of investigation, UK and US regulatory agencies officially concluded this was psychological manipulation, what intelligence communities call psyops. Whether Cambridge Analytica swung elections is debatable. That they deployed large-scale psychographic manipulation is documented fact. This raises a specific question. How exactly does this manipulation work? And if it works, why doesn't it feel like manipulation? Surveillance capitalism isn't aggressive marketing. It's an economic system that commodifies human experience. Here's how it functions. First, data extraction. Platforms collect behavioral data through tracking technologies. Cookies, pixels, device fingerprinting, cross-device matching, API monitoring. Every click, scroll, pause, hover, search, purchase, location, social connection, your typing patterns, your cursor movements, when you have camera access granted, facial expressions. Second, aggregation. Information from dozens to hundreds of sources compiles into unified user profiles. These profiles contain personal identifiers, demographics, browsing history, purchase patterns, location data, social networks, psychographic traits, real-time behavioral signals. The aggregation happens across devices. You browse on your laptop, not logged in to any account. Later, you pick up your smartphone and open Instagram. Probabilistic tracking correlates the laptop session with your smartphone based on same Wi-Fi network, similar timing, overlapping behavioral patterns. You see ads for what you browsed on the laptop, despite never searching those topics on your phone. Third, behavioral prediction. Machine learning algorithms identify patterns correlating behaviors with outcomes. For example, users with these 15 characteristics are 73% likely to purchase within 48 hours if shown this message. Or, users displaying these behavioral signals are vulnerable to scarcity messaging when anxious. Fourth, behavioral modification. Predictions are sold to advertisers, political campaigns, insurers, employers, financial institutions. They deploy targeted interventions designed to trigger predicted behaviors. You don't see random ads, you see ads engineered to exploit your specific psychological vulnerabilities at the moment when algorithms predict you're most susceptible. Fifth, feedback loop closure. Behavioral responses to interventions are measured with granular precision. Did you click? How long did you watch? Did you purchase? Did you share? This data refines prediction accuracy and manipulation effectiveness continuously. If the prediction was accurate, confidence increases, targeting intensifies. If inaccurate, the profile adjusts, new predictions generate. The loop repeats millions of times daily. Understanding this business model logic is essential. This isn't conspiracy, it's explicit revenue mechanism. Companies provide free services in exchange for behavioral data extraction. That data becomes surveillance assets, a capital class that attracts massive investment even before revenue generation. Examples: Uber, Twitter, Wolt raised billions in investment pre-revenue based on data collection potential. The manipulation isn't accidental, it's the product being sold. Psychographic profiling involves categorizing individuals based on psychological traits, personality, values, attitudes, interests, emotional triggers, rather than just demographics. Here's the technical process. Data collection phase. Platforms monitor clicks, watch time, pauses, scrolls, cursor movements, typing patterns, purchase history, social media posts, likes, shares, follows, location patterns, cross-device activity. They track not just what you click, but how long you hesitate before clicking, not just what you watch, but at which exact moment you pause or rewind. Not just what you buy, but what you add to cart and then remove. Trait inference phase. Algorithms infer personality dimensions, the big five: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, political ideology, moral values, emotional vulnerabilities, decision-making styles, persuasion susceptibility. They identify when you're anxious based on browsing patterns. They detect when you're vulnerable to aspiration-based messaging based on what you view but don't purchase. Profile creation. Individuals are assigned scores across dozens to hundreds of dimensions. This creates psychographic profiles more granular than traditional demographic segmentation. Demographics tell marketers you're a 30-year-old urban professional. Psychographics tell them you're high in neuroticism, respond to fear-based messaging, are price-sensitive but aspirational, and are most vulnerable to manipulation late at night after consuming negative news. Targeted messaging. Messages are tailored to individual psychological profiles using persuasion techniques predicted to be most effective for that specific psychological configuration. Authority messaging for those who respond to expertise. Social proof for those influenced by peer behavior. Scarcity messaging for those with loss aversion. Flattery for those scoring high on narcissism. Research from Technological University Dublin in 2023 demonstrates machine learning models can predict persuasion effectiveness with 53 to 70% accuracy based on psychometric profiles. Classification ability was highest for rhetorical devices and flattery techniques, 60 to 70% accuracy. 70% accuracy means for every 10 targeted individuals, 7 will respond as predicted. That's a massive advantage over random messaging. More concerning, incorporating emotion-based variables significantly improved model performance. This indicates emotional vulnerabilities are algorithmically detectable and targetable. The algorithms identify when you're anxious, insecure, or psychologically vulnerable and exploit those states. This means platforms don't just know what you do, they infer why you do it and exploit those psychological mechanisms. A user doesn't see random ads, they see ads engineered to trigger their specific emotional vulnerabilities, cognitive biases, and decision-making patterns at the moment those vulnerabilities are most exploitable. Here's where surveillance capitalism and psychographic profiling create closed-loop manipulation. Step 1. User browses web, uses social media, makes purchases, searches for information. Tracking records behavioral data across platforms and devices. Step 2. Algorithms analyze patterns across millions of users, identifying correlations between behaviors and psychological traits. User is categorized. This person is price-sensitive but aspirational, responds to scarcity messaging, is vulnerable when anxious, has high neuroticism, low openness to experience. Step 3. User receives personalized content algorithmically selected to exploit their specific profile. Content is designed to trigger emotional responses, anxiety, aspiration, fear, desire, that correlate with target behavior. If the goal is to sell a product, user sees ads emphasizing limited availability to trigger loss aversion. If the goal is political persuasion, user sees messages emphasizing threats to trigger fear response. Step 4. User's response is measured with granular precision. Did they click? How long did they watch? Did they purchase? Did they vote? Did they continue engaging with similar content? Every behavioral signal is captured. Step 5. Behavioral outcome is compared to prediction. If the prediction was accurate, user clicked, purchased, voted as predicted, confidence in the profile increases, and targeting refines further. If inaccurate, the profile adjusts based on what didn't work, and new predictions generate. Step 6. Loop repeats continuously. Each iteration creates progressively more effective manipulation. The algorithm learns your resistance patterns. It identifies which tactics work on you specifically and deploys them with increasing precision. Critical feature: opacity. Throughout this process, users typically have no awareness that behavioral data is being extracted at granular level, that a psychological profile has been constructed, that content is individually tailored based on psychological vulnerabilities, that their responses are being measured to refine future manipulation, or that they're in a closed feedback system designed to modify their behavior. This creates a philosophical problem. Classical definitions of autonomy require 4 conditions: absence of coercion, adequate information, rational deliberation, and alignment with authentic values. Surveillance capitalism undermines all 4. Coercion isn't physical force, it's engineering environments to make certain choices overwhelmingly likely, while maintaining the technical possibility of alternative choices. Adequate information requires knowing when you're being targeted and how. Users typically have neither. Rational deliberation requires time and diverse information. Algorithmic curation provides narrow, engagement-optimized information designed to trigger fast, emotional responses. Alignment with authentic values becomes questionable when the values themselves may have been shaped by algorithmic suggestion. But here's the trap. Research from Behavioral Public Policy in 2024 shows that effective manipulation doesn't reduce experienced autonomy. Participants experiencing behavioral nudges reported feeling slightly more autonomous than control groups. Effective behavioral influence doesn't feel coercive. The absence of felt coercion doesn't mean genuine autonomy exists. This is why the question from the opening matters. Your subjective experience, "I'm making my own choices," isn't reliable evidence. Effective manipulation works precisely because it feels natural. You experience yourself as choosing freely, while the informational architecture makes certain outcomes overwhelmingly more likely than alternatives. That's the mechanism. Surveillance capitalism extracts data, builds profiles, targets interventions, measures responses, and refines manipulation in closed loops. Psychographic profiling makes targeting precise enough to achieve 53 to 70% prediction accuracy. And the paradox is that effective manipulation doesn't feel manipulative, which is exactly what makes it effective. But does it actually work? Research from the past 3 years provides answers, with important caveats. What does research actually show? All studies discussed here are cited with full details, publication year, journal, sample sizes, in the description below. A 2025 experimental study tested whether AI systems can manipulate human decisions without people noticing. Important caveat up front: this study is currently available as an archive preprint, not yet peer-reviewed, so these findings are preliminary. However, the methodology is rigorous and the effect sizes are substantial. Researchers had 233 participants interact with AI agents in simulated decision-making scenarios. Some participants interacted with neutral agents providing unbiased information. Others interacted with manipulative agents programmed with hidden incentives to shift participants' preferences toward harmful options. A third group interacted with sophisticated emotional manipulation agents using established psychological strategies. Results: participants interacting with manipulative agents were significantly more likely to shift their preferences toward the AI's hidden incentives and away from their own best interests. Effect sizes were substantial. Manipulative agents produced 70 to 200% larger increases in preference for hidden, harmful incentives compared to optimal options. Put simply, people interacting with manipulative AI shifted their decisions dramatically toward what the AI wanted them to do and away from what was beneficial for them. Quote from the study: "Our findings reveal that humans are highly susceptible to AI-driven manipulation. Participants in the manipulative groups were significantly more likely to shift their preferences toward the agent's hidden incentives and away from beneficial options." Here's what's particularly unsettling. The study tested both simple covert manipulation and sophisticated psychological manipulation strategies. Using sophisticated tactics didn't make manipulation more effective. Basic covert manipulation already worked. You don't need elaborate psychological warfare. Simply having hidden incentives and optimizing to achieve them was sufficient to shift human decisions significantly. Important limitations. Again, this is a preprint awaiting peer review. The study used simulated low-stakes scenarios, real-world stakes involving money, relationships, or political consequences may increase or decrease susceptibility. This was short-term interaction. Long-term effects of sustained manipulation are unknown. Participants knew they were in a study, potentially increasing vigilance compared to real-world contexts. And critically, there was no follow-up measuring whether participants later realized they had been manipulated. But the finding stands. Humans demonstrate high susceptibility to AI-driven covert manipulation in experimental conditions. Published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, MIT researchers examined whether psychographic micro-targeting actually changes behavior. They conducted field experiments with over 3,000 participants exposed to political messaging. Messages were either generic or psychographically tailored based on personality profiles. Results: psychographically targeted messages were significantly more persuasive than generic messages. Effect sizes varied by personality trait. High openness individuals responded differently than high conscientiousness individuals. Critically, participants were unaware their psychological profiles were being used to craft messages. The manipulation operated below conscious awareness. The study concludes micro-targeting based on psychological profiles can effectively influence attitudes and behaviors, and this influence operates largely outside recipients' awareness. Limitations. The study measured short-term attitude shifts, not long-term behavioral changes. Whether persuasion persists beyond initial exposure is unknown. Additionally, effect sizes were moderate, not universal mind control, but statistically significant persuasive advantage. Between 2018 and 2023, regulatory investigations in the UK and US documented the scope and methods of Cambridge Analytica's operations. UK Information Commissioner's Office findings: Cambridge Analytica harvested data from 87 million Facebook users without consent. They built ocean personality models for each user. They deployed targeted political messaging during 2016 Brexit referendum and US presidential election. U.S. Federal Trade Commission conclusions, the firm used psychographic profiling to identify persuasion vulnerabilities. Messages were individually tailored to exploit those vulnerabilities. The scale was massive, millions of individually customized messages delivered across platforms. Whether Cambridge Analytica's interventions swung elections remains contested. Multiple analyses suggest effects were modest at population level, but regulatory agencies confirmed large-scale psychographic manipulation occurred, operated without user awareness, and constituted what intelligence communities classify as psychological operations. This isn't theoretical possibility, it's documented deployment at scale. Researchers developed machine learning models to predict which persuasion techniques would be most effective for individuals based on their psychometric profiles. Using data from over 1,000 participants, they tested whether algorithms could predict persuasion susceptibility with meaningful accuracy. Results: models achieved 53 to 70% prediction accuracy. Classification was highest for rhetorical devices and flattery techniques, 60 to 70% accuracy. Incorporating emotion-based variables significantly improved performance. This indicates emotional states are algorithmically detectable and exploitable. The study demonstrates, with sufficient behavioral data, algorithms can predict which psychological tactics will work on specific individuals, with accuracy far exceeding random chance. Limitations: prediction accuracy varied substantially by individual. Some people were highly predictable, above 80% accuracy. Others were near random, below 55% accuracy. We don't yet know which factors determine predictability. Personality traits, cognitive flexibility, awareness of manipulation, all may play roles, but precise mechanisms remain unclear. Multiple converging lines of evidence support these findings. Kaspersky's 2024 web tracking report documented 38.7 billion tracking incidents globally between July 2023 and June 2024. At least 70% of online users are profiled. NordVPN's 2024 analysis found the average website contains 48 trackers. Social media platforms average 160 trackers per site. The data broker industry reached $257 billion in valuation in 2023, projected to grow to $441 billion by 2032. This infrastructure exists, it operates at scale, and research demonstrates it produces measurable behavioral influence. But here's where honest presentation requires acknowledging complexity. Research from economics and philosophy argues that nudges and behavioral interventions don't necessarily undermine autonomy if they align with individuals' reflective values. The argument, if you value health and receive a nudge toward healthier eating, that nudge doesn't compromise autonomy, it supports it. This raises a genuine philosophical question. Is manipulation wrong if it moves people toward outcomes they reflectively endorse? Additionally, the Behavioral Public Policy Study found that effective nudges don't reduce experienced autonomy. Participants felt they were choosing freely, even when their choices were being architecturally guided. This doesn't mean autonomy was preserved. It means subjective experience of autonomy isn't reliable evidence of actual autonomy. And importantly, not all targeting is harmful. Research documents cases where algorithmic recommendations facilitated beneficial discovery. LGBTQ youth finding supportive communities, people with rare medical conditions finding specialist resources, isolated individuals discovering cultural content they couldn't access locally. Same mechanism, different outcomes. Whether surveillance capitalism harms or helps depends enormously on who's targeted, how, and for what purpose. Here's what we genuinely don't know yet. Long-term effects of sustained manipulation are untested. Most studies measure short-term attitude shifts or single decisions. Whether years of continuous psychographic targeting produces permanent changes in decision-making patterns, values, or identity is unknown. Individual resistance factors remain unclear. Some people show high susceptibility, above 70% prediction accuracy. Others show near-random susceptibility, below 55% accuracy. We don't know why. Cognitive flexibility, personality traits, prior manipulation awareness, education level, all plausible, but precision understanding doesn't exist. Whether awareness reduces susceptibility is contested. Some research suggests knowing you're being targeted provides modest protection. Other research suggests awareness makes little difference once emotional triggers activate. Cross-cultural generalizability is unknown. Nearly all research uses Western, English-speaking samples. Whether findings apply to cultures with different individualism, collectivism values, trust in institutions, or media literacy is unclear. You now understand the neurobiological mechanism. Surveillance capitalism extracts data, builds psychographic profiles, deploys targeted interventions, measures responses, and refines manipulation in closed loops. Research shows 70% prediction accuracy, meaning 7 out of 10 targeted individuals respond as predicted. But here's what haunts this analysis. 70% accuracy means 30% resist. We don't yet know why. If you've resisted targeted manipulation, noticed yourself rejecting algorithmically suggested preferences, questioning why certain content appeared, consciously choosing alternatives to what platforms recommended, comment below. Or conversely, if you've recognized moments where you internalized algorithmically suggested preferences as authentic choices, bought something you didn't consciously decide to want, adopted beliefs you can't trace to deliberate reasoning, that matters too. Individual resistance patterns are the data gap research can't fill. Your specific observations complicate the aggregate picture in ways population-level studies can't capture. And if you find value in this kind of analysis, rigorous, honest, willing to sit with genuine uncertainty, subscribe. Next video explores the economic incentives driving surveillance capitalism, why platforms are designed this way, and what would need to change structurally. Shall we continue? We started with a question. Did you choose the last thing you bought? Or was that choice engineered before you were aware you were making it? Now you understand the mechanism. The research shows this isn't imagination. 38.7 billion tracking incidents in 2024, 70% prediction accuracy in controlled experiments, documented deployment at scale during Cambridge Analytica operations. Your subjective experience, "I'm making my own choices," isn't reliable evidence. Effective manipulation works precisely because it feels natural. You experience yourself as choosing freely, while the informational architecture makes certain outcomes overwhelmingly more likely than alternatives. But, and this matters, causality is unclear. Prediction accuracy varies dramatically by individual. Some people show high susceptibility, others near random. We don't know what determines the difference. And importantly, not all targeting is harmful. Same mechanisms facilitate beneficial discovery for marginalized populations, isolated communities, people seeking specialized resources. Whether surveillance capitalism harms or helps depends enormously on context. This doesn't mean you're powerless. Awareness doesn't dissolve the architecture, but it does shift you from being unconsciously affected to consciously navigating. That's not freedom, but it's not passivity either. The question worth sitting with: how much of what you experience as autonomous choice is accurate perception, and how much is engineered outcome that feels autonomous because the engineering was effective? You can't easily exit. Economic participation, social connection, information access increasingly require engaging with these systems. Individual awareness helps, but awareness doesn't dissolve structural constraints. You can notice the trap, and that noticing doesn't free you, but it does change how consciously you navigate within it. That's not a solution, it's constrained agency. And constrained agency is worth defending.